So for this next conversation, I am very happy to start a video that we're going to see first around the case for gendered response to COVID-19 in partnership with Care USA, and then welcome to the stage Michelle Nunn, President and CEO of Care USA, and our esteemed panel.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be back at Concordia, and I'm Michelle Nunn. I'm the president and CEO of CARE. We're an international development and humanitarian organization, and our journey began 75 years ago after World War II with the creation and delivery of the very first care packages. Our commitment remains stronger than ever today, and right now we have teams that are responding in 69 countries across 5 regions, and to date they have reached over 19 million people. So we feel that we are rising once again to the challenge, and perhaps the greatest challenge of our generation. 6 months ago, CARE sounded the alarm that as the pandemic raced across the world, that we would not only be facing a health crisis, but we were already facing deepening hunger and economic fallout. And also really seeing the widening of systemic inequalities. And 6 months ago, we also set out to start to collect the data to illustrate what was happening around the world, and specifically to focus on the growing gender gap. So today, we have over 6,000 women globally who've shared their COVID concerns, how COVID is impacting their families, and what's topmost and the priority for them. What are they worried about? What are they thinking about? The first thing, they're worried about losing their jobs and their income. The second is they're worried about going hungry and how they feed their families. And the third is that they're facing significant mental health challenges. So this data is invaluable. It is helping us to understand the challenges and that really designing the most effective COVID responses. And I hope that many of you all will be able to visit our virtual Concordia booth and see the rapid gender analysis, which is what we call this work, filling the data gap to build back equal. And we hope that you'll also join us in sounding the alarm on behalf of women and girls. We know that without swift action, that we are going to see decades of progress, and it's going to be thrown into reverse. We're already seeing this. We know that we must really invest in women's power and creativity at this critical moment. So one small step that I'd ask the audience to consider is signing our petition to Congress, urging them to put women and girls at the center of global COVID relief and to invest $20 billion, which is a very, very small fraction of the total COVID investment to address the virus around the world and the cooperative action. So I really want to begin our panel conversation with a thank you, a note of gratitude to Colgate and PepsiCo, not only for co-hosting this panel, but also for their extraordinary leadership in this arena and their generous commitment to care and how they are making a difference in meeting this moment around the world. We have, I think, a really terrific panel, a perfect group to bring together to talk about the gendered response to COVID. So I want to welcome them. I want to start with Anne-Marie Motte, who is the Vice President and General Manager. She's the Global and Personal Care and Home Care at Colgate-Palmolive. Tina Bigalke, who is the Global Chief Diversity and Engagement Officer at PepsiCo. Jenna Daugherty, who's the Divisional Vice President, Global Citizenship and Sustainability at Abbott. She's also the Vice President for the Abbott Fund. and Marcos Neto, who's the Director of Finance and Sector Hub at the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. So we have an illustrious panel with really illustrious titles there, but really most important, really extraordinary leadership. So Marcus, I'm going to start with you. And like you, the UN is assessing the impact of COVID on the world and on women in particular. So maybe you can start us out by just giving us a high-level assessment. Give us the global picture of what you're seeing around gender and the COVID response and crisis.
Thank you, Michelle. As with CARE, the United Nations is also celebrating its 75th anniversary today, in a very different scenario here in New York City. So we have put it out two major documents which does this assessment and summarize the situation of COVID vis-a-vis women in general. The Secretary General has put out a policy briefing on the impact of COVID on women, and we at UNDP have put together an economic impacts and gender report. And as you said, it's no doubt that COVID is affecting people differently and is affecting women and other vulnerable members of society in a much worse way. We've seen an increase in poverty and on women and women-head household. We know that women does most of the non-remunerated job. We already seen that women is working an extra 2.5 hours with the situation of COVID. The video that you all saw had the statistic that 70% of all healthcare workers are women, which means women is much more vulnerable to getting the job in that sense. And I think we all know that the last 12 months, there were 243 million women and girls aged 15 to 49 that had gender-based violence. And we know that this has increased. This is a huge human rights issue that needs to be addressed at very fast and immediately. Perhaps the last statistic that I would tell you that we're finding out is as we've moved to the digital world, there are 43 million women that have no connection to the internet, right? And that 165 million fewer women that own a mobile phone. So as we're moving to this, in the current crisis, as well as we try to come out and recover better of this crisis, we are seeing a fundamental reduction, if you want, on the accesses and the gains we have seen in women worldwide. And as you said, that this has to stop. We have to be able to not only address with the immediate situation, but make sure that we come back out of this in a more equal society with equal aspects of gender rights in that sense. So that's a little bit of our highlights in terms of what we're finding out of the socioeconomic assessments that we've conducted in more than 100 countries and the recovery plans that more than 60 governments have already put in place under the leadership of the United Nations Development Program as the technical leader socioeconomic for the UN.
So, Marcos, just very, very, very quickly, how do we address this? How do we ensure that our responses are taking this into account? And what is the role of the private sector? Just as an intro into our next guest, perhaps a segue.
Well, I think it's very important that as we are coming to recover from COVID, that we focus on aspects of the economy that speaks directly to women, right? So it's important to address the issues of the care economy, paid and unpaid, right? It's important to address the informal economy. How do we support the informal economy? How do we help that translate into the formal economy, as most of women are in the informal economy? So we have to be able also to deal with social protection. Most of the women being in the informal economy have no access to formal social protection. We at UNDP, for example, have created a proposal to provide a temporary basic income to everyone in the world, paid by the savings on the debt that is going on in the most poorest countries in the world. Now, in terms of the private sector, it's very important that as big companies like the ones we have in this panel and SMEs as well, that you figure out a way that, one, you maintain jobs, you protect the workforce that you have as much as you can, right? Two, that you try to reach out and protect your value chain as much as you can, and as possible, as much as you can, getting into that informal economy value chain, because that is where we have most of the women going there. Now, we as UNDP have a program called Agenda Seal, that we work with companies to assess all your policies and all your value chains to make sure that you have as much women in your direct employment and dealing with them in the best way possible, but also across your value chain. So I think it's very important that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think you've done a terrific job of articulating that. And so let me turn to Anne Marie, and it's sort of an invitation then to talk about, so how are we seeing this put into practice? Increasing hygiene practices we know is critical to defeating this virus. We know, as Marcus said, and as we have seen, that women and girls are on the front lines of this. And so maybe tell us, Colgate-Palmolive has a specific and very powerful role as a company here. Maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about specifically your Safe Hands commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. When the crisis hit hard in March, it was really obvious for us that we had a role to play because Colgate is the number one manufacturer of liquid and soap globally, the number two bar soap manufacturer, but most importantly, we are a caring, innovative company. We work to reimagine, a healthier future for people, for the planet. And when you have a strong purpose, that's when you can really make decision fast, make decision quick. So that was for us, speed is of essence in this program. Our Safe Hand initiatives came together in 35 days. And it was really important for us to go fast. We mobilized, 5 manufacturing sites on 3 different continents to produce 25 million bar soap. Some of it we've seen in the video, actually, and donate them. And I can tell you, Colgate people have been, working relentlessly, but always with a smile because, first, this is our mission. And second, we partnered with organizations and aid agencies like CARE to make sure that we distribute those bar soaps to the people most in need.
And any big lessons that you think are applicable that other companies and organizations should be taking into account?
Yeah, so some of the key learning for us in this project, first have been the need for purpose and the fact that advancing the health and wellness, which is the reason why people wake up every morning at Colgate, what was driving us. And then I think there was an important point in learning in health and hygiene, which was the need for education. In addition to the need for accessing, the need for education, including in countries where there is no issue of accessing the product, is critical. On the bar soap, we've used the back to give instruction in partnership with WHO that are understandable in all languages. And so as the product travel, it's actually an education tool at the same time.
That's so powerful because it is true. We need to both provide the assets, but also the educational context that enables people to deploy them. So, Jenna, I'm going to turn to you. And Abbott is making such significant investments in CARE, but so many other organizations on frontline health workers. And we know that frontline health workers are disproportionately women. And we also know that not only are they absorbing frontline health care, but they're also doing the care at home. 70 to 80% of the additional unpaid care. So can you talk about how you are helping to work to ensure that women are supported in all the roles?
Well, sure. And thank you for the question. I think it's really critical. But I also think there's a precursor to this question, which is how do we ensure that women can be in the roles that they want to fulfill, and particularly leadership roles. And, as we, as a healthcare company, look at sort of global health broadly, we've looked at, an ecological model that Women in Global Health has published that highlights really 5 layers that impede women's advancement in global health. And it starts with, many of the items that are outlined in the report that CARE released. So, starts with things like individual factors, like internalized, gender norms, then, moves to interpersonal factors, sexual harassment in the workplace, not having role models or mentors. Then, institutional factors like policies that support women, maternity coverage, caregiver coverage. And then, community factors like sharing good practices that support and really encourage women. And then finally, public policy factors like, inadequacy in gender rights policy. And so, when we look at those mountain of factors that are working against women, we know that those factors are only exacerbated in a crisis. And so it's easy to understand why women don't make it into those leadership roles in the healthcare workforce in the same way that men do. And still, as you mentioned, women make up the vast majority of that workforce. They are on the front lines. And, I recently read an article that called women the shock absorbers of the pandemic and really any health crisis. And this is true. And I think, your CARES report notes that globally women do 3 times more unpaid work than men. And so, back to your original question about our approach has really, it has to be focused on women in their roles as both formal healthcare workers and also informal caregivers, and it has to be multifaceted, looking across public policy, community practices, and so on.
Well, it's you all have been extraordinarily comprehensive in the way that you're thinking about this. Any pivots that you all have made that you can articulate and share in just a word or two that you think are relevant for other companies?
I don't know if it's a full pivot, but I think taking time to listen to women up front, partnering with organizations that do take the time to listen to women on the front lines has been something that we've paid special attention to.
Well, that's the best place to start, and then to drive from there. So, Tina, PepsiCo has taken these things into account, both in terms of your workforce, in terms of the supply chain, in terms of your programming. Can you just speak about how you're doing all of that?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle, and I'm happy to be here on behalf of PepsiCo. First, I would say, the health and safety of our employees across our supply chain around the globe is of paramount importance to us as a business, all the way from our frontline folks who make, move, and sell our product through to the folks that sit in our corporate offices. So from a frontline employee standpoint, we immediately implemented critical safety protocols for all associates globally. And we enhanced our leave benefits to ensure that our employees felt supported during the uncertainty of COVID. And we continue to evolve these safety protocols both in our field locations and in our offices as new guidelines come out for COVID-19.
And how about in your overall programming? I know that we've seen it in terms of your investment philanthropically, but talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so if you look, I'll talk a little bit about PepsiCo programming, and then I'll talk about our partnerships globally in one specific area in agriculture. So internal to PepsiCo, for our working parents, and specifically women, who we all know, we've all said have really felt the increased economic impact and burden during the pandemic, we've done a couple of things to help. We've enhanced work flexibility. We've enhanced our childcare support, not only to be external, but also internal childcare if you need to bring a childcare provider into your home. We've enhanced our educational support to include virtual tutoring in this environment that we're in. And we've also enhanced our dependent care reimbursement. Now, switching to our work globally, as other panelists have said, women are facing extraordinary hardships, particularly in the world of agriculture and farming, which is important to us as a beverage and foods company. In partnership with CARE, we're supporting a program called She Feeds the World that trains female farmers around the globe in everything from increasing crop yield to providing nutrition resources so that they could be successful. Most people don't know that women farmers account for more than half of the world's crop production, and they frequently don't have the infrastructure or the resources that they need for support. And we know when we invest in women farmers, it helps uplift our communities and create a more sustainable food system that benefits everyone. And then this year in particular, building on that partnership, we've also announced a new 5-year, $20 million partnership with USAID to make agriculture more inclusive, to empower female farmers, women-owned businesses, and women-led suppliers as additional support as a result of the pandemic.
Well, it could not be a more important time to do that work. We know that if women had equal access to agricultural inputs and training, that they could feed 150 million more people around the world. So, so Tina, I'm going to call upon you for a closing question, and we might just reverse the order a little bit here. We just have literally about a minute to miss all together. So if each of you could just take one sentence and say, what are you most worried about? And then what are you most hopeful about in terms of building back a more just and equitable society for women?
Yeah, so I'll take this one really quickly, because the thing that worries me the most is also what provides me the most hope. And that is the action and dialogue that we've seen from the private sector to break down systemic barriers, looking at our entire ecosystem, not only internally, but beyond our four walls, like the partnership that PepsiCo has with CARES, I think will help communities globally. And so, while I'm worried, I'm also hopeful that we'll continue to take this action to create a more sustainable and equitable world.
Terrific. How about you, Jenna?
I'm, as we've sort of discussed, I'm a little worried about backtracking on advancements, particularly for women's economic, empowerment and development. But I also think that's maybe our greatest opportunity in terms of recovery and building resilience, because we've seen, when we work around the world, that women are creative. They understand their community's needs, and they can mobilize and deploy resources in really innovative ways.
Perfect. How about you, Anne-Marie?
I'm worried about the ripple effect of the crisis and, how it can have broad impact. But at the same time, because it's humongous, that's why I'm hopeful that we're going to use this crisis as a reset button, and that this is going to be an opportunity for all of us, including in private sector, to put, action towards some of the biggest challenge. Some of them were quoted in this panel, but we could extend to climate change and to ongoing sustainability and social responsibility, which are also coming at the forefront of this crisis.
Thank you. Marcus, you get one word to talk about hope. What gives you hope? One word.
The need to get out of this better, because climate change is around the corner. If we don't learn, don't get better, it's going to get worse.
So I think if we listen to women and if we build an equitable, truly equitable society, we can be hopeful about not only overcoming the crisis before us, but also building a dynamic and powerful future. So thank you all for helping cast a light on that. And thank you for the extraordinary work that your companies are doing and the partnerships that you're bringing to bear on the world. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.